Look at this massive fiberglass statue in Bemidji. He smiles down at tourists, clad in bright red flannel, standing next to his giant blue ox. Most of us assume this legend is as old as the nation itself, a piece of frontier folklore passed down organically around crackling campfires by the men who built the country. His lore is famously oversized. The stories claim he dragged his axe behind him to carve out the Grand Canyon, and that he could clear an entire acre of forest with a single sweeping blow, felling dozens of massive pines at once. The historical record reveals a different story. Paul Bunyan is a calculated 20th century marketing gimmick. Folklorists use a specific term for this, folklore. It occurs when corporate interests manufacture artificial myths, package them up, and successfully pass them off as ancient traditions. This photograph shows where the name Paul Bunyan actually originated. These are 19th century logging camps in the Great Lakes region, isolated, freezing, and incredibly dangerous. In these camps, Paul Bunyan was a crude brag used by veteran loggers to haze new recruits. They would spin impossible yarns about a giant lumberjack specifically to test how much a greenhorn would actually believe. The real loggers were often marginalized immigrants, French Canadians and Scandinavians engaging in violent labor struggles. Their lives were defined by dangerous work, heavy drinking, and frequent strikes. This raises a central mystery. How did a gritty, working-class campfire joke get hijacked and transformed into a sanitized national icon? This image captures the sheer industrial scale of the Red River Lumber Company in the early 1900s. They were a titan of the timber industry, and they had spent decades stripping Minnesota's white pine forests bare.
Having exhausted their local supply, Red River moved their entire operation westward to the Pacific Northwest. But they faced a marketing crisis. They had to convince Midwestern buyers that this new California wood was just as good as the Minnesota pine they were used to. Advertising executive William B. Loghead solved the problem. He was a former lumberjack who remembered those old campfire brags and saw a massive commercial opportunity. Loghead pitched a plan to hijack the regional Bunyan joke and turn him into a national corporate mascot to sell Western lumber. Masking such a massive industrial transition required a comprehensive blueprint for myth-making. The first step was standardization. Loghead gave Bunyan a permanent visual identity, outfitting him in a red flannel shirt and a thick beard. He even took the previously nameless blue ox from the oral traditions and christened him Babe. Next came sanitization. The company scrubbed away the reality of the logging camps, completely removing references to deadly working conditions, heavy drinking, and brutal springtime brawls. This sanitized narrative deliberately ignored the history of labor unrest. This crowd of men and armed soldiers represents the actual conflicts led by the industrial workers of the world that the company wanted consumers to forget. Loghead reimagined the corporate boss as a benevolent, cheerful giant who loved his workers. The final step was distribution. Red River blasted these promotional pamphlets nationwide for 2 decades, ensuring every American home saw the new corporate Paul Bunyan. Through this process of standardization and sanitization, a localized oral tradition was successfully enclosed and weaponized as private corporate property. By the 1950s, the campaign was so successful that the American public had completely forgotten Paul Bunyan began as a lumber advertisement. This folklore came with a tragic cultural cost. These tall tales of Bunyan carving out rivers and lakes actively displaced the actual creation stories of the indigenous Ojibwe and Dakota peoples. The all-white, cheerful myth also erased the diverse workers, the Native Americans, Finns, and French Canadians, who actually suffered through the grueling labor. As you can see from these massive ancient logs, the cartoon mythology masked the brutal, massive environmental destruction required to clear-cut the continent. Paul Bunyan endures as the ultimate American mascot because he proves how easily a corporation can rewrite history, wrapping environmental destruction and labor exploitation into a cute, sellable cartoon.